The political stalemate that has paralyzed Washington has transcended abstract ideological bickering and devolved into a full-blown humanitarian crisis, threatening the most vulnerable citizens of the United States. This is no longer merely a budget impasse. It is a profound failure of governance that has taken 42 million Americans, a population larger than many mid-sized nations, as political hostages. This is FPV Explainer, where we break down the most fascinating stories in drone warfare and global affairs, including critical analyses of U.S. domestic politics. If you're enjoying this deep dive, hit the like button, subscribe, and drop a comment telling us what topic you want to see next. Your feedback shapes our future videos and keeps us bringing you clear, detailed analysis from the front lines. Also, please watch this video to the very end, even if you play it in the background without sound, as your continuous viewing is critical to help promote the truth about the war. The core issue is the funding lapse for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, the crucial federal lifeline universally known as food stamps. For the first time in history, the continuation of this program, which provides the necessary means for millions to secure basic nutrition, has been placed in jeopardy during a government shutdown. This policy brinksmanship means that as early as this weekend, a colossal segment of the American populace will begin to lose access to their food benefits. The impact is devastatingly targeted. Statistics confirm that the majority of SNAP recipients are low-income working families with children, the elderly, and individuals with disabilities. Local authorities, recognizing the imminent disaster, are already sounding the alarm. Mayors and governors, such as the governor of New York, have officially declared a food security emergency, acknowledging that no single state budget can possibly absorb the colossal federal contribution, which in New York's case amounts to $650 million per month, that is suddenly disappearing. This forces local communities and charities to attempt to bridge a gap that is structurally impossible to cover. The tragedy of the situation is compounded by the political cynicism of the stalemate. This current shutdown is now the second longest in U.S. history, yet its human cost is exponentially greater because of this specific program cut. Trump, who controls the dominant party in Congress, is using the fundamental human need for food as a lever to secure unrelated political concessions. This is an unprecedented and deeply demoralizing tactic. Unlike previous shutdowns, including one led by Trump in 2019, where his administration ensured SNAP benefits continued, the current refusal to authorize funding is a deliberate act of coercion. It proves that the paralysis in Washington has ceased to be about policy differences and has become a morally bankrupt game of political risk, using the hunger of millions to force a legislative outcome. The human reality of this political gambit is being seen in food banks across the nation, where ordinary Americans are mobilizing to save their neighbors from a crisis manufactured entirely in the halls of Congress.
We have established the devastating human cost of the budget impasse: 42 million Americans facing hunger. Now, we must confront the political engine driving this suffering. The act of calculated political cynicism, where Trump is using the fundamental human need for food as a ruthless negotiation tactic. This is not a failure of budget reconciliation. It is a profound moral abdication that has turned vulnerable citizens into expendable political pawns. The core of this strategy is simple. Trump has taken the SNAP food stamps as a hostage for legislative leverage. He is explicitly demanding that Congress authorize a clean bill to resume government operations without the parallel passage of federal tax credits that would help Americans acquire private health insurance. For Trump, the debate is not about the merits of healthcare reform. It is about forcing a legislative victory on his terms. His strategy is to starve the Democratic opposition of a key negotiation point, extending those healthcare subsidies, by making the humanitarian cost of the impasse too high for the Democrats to bear. He believes the public pressure created by mass hunger will force them to concede. The depth of this political maneuver is exposed by a stark historical contrast. During the previous government shutdown led by Trump in 2019, his administration made a deliberate, conscious decision to ensure that SNAP benefits were fully funded and distributed. The mechanism to do so existed then, and it exists now. His current refusal to authorize funding is therefore not a matter of legal or budgetary impossibility. It is a conscious, politically driven choice to inflict maximum pain. This maneuver proves that the current crisis is entirely a political farce, an amoral exercise where the welfare of millions is subordinated to the leader's legislative agenda. Trump's public rhetoric reinforces this callous calculus. He continually deflects blame, insisting that the Democrats are the ones who closed the country and that the responsibility for the crisis lies solely with them. This strategy attempts to transfer the public outrage generated by mass hunger onto his political rivals. However, the American public, witnessing the spectacle, increasingly understands that the responsibility for the hunger of 42 million people rests with the leader who is deliberately holding the funds in escrow for a political advantage. This unprecedented move marks a low point in political negotiation, transforming essential humanitarian aid into a brutal tool of coercion.
We have analyzed the moral catastrophe of hunger used as leverage. Now we confront the immediate, visible breakdown of critical national infrastructure, the chaos gripping the American skies. The political stalemate in Washington has ceased to be an abstract legislative problem. It is a tangible, daily paralysis that has grounded air travel and exposed the fragility of the nation's core public services. The systemic crisis began with a simple, brutal reality. Tens of thousands of essential government workers are being forced to work without pay. This includes approximately 13,000 air traffic controllers and 50,000 Transportation Security Administration agents. These are not non-essential personnel. They are the absolute linchpins of the entire air travel safety system. They are tasked with the minute-by-minute responsibility of guiding millions of passengers safely through the nation's crowded airspace and securing every airport. Yet they are being asked to perform these high-stress, zero-error jobs while their families face the threat of hunger and financial ruin, a situation that the workers themselves have rightly deemed untenable. This forced labor without compensation has triggered a massive cascading failure across the country's transportation network. The withdrawal of labor, born of financial desperation, has led to chronic understaffing in control towers and security checkpoints. The result has been immediate and devastating chaos in major aviation hubs. We have seen reports of mass flight delays and cancellations across the nation, hitting major centers like New York, Austin, Nashville, Houston, and Dallas. At its worst point, the system experienced a staggering over 7,000 flight delays and more than 1,200 outright cancellations in a single day. This paralyzes commerce, strands millions of travelers, and demonstrates that the legislative impasse in the Capitol has instantly brought the nation's busiest commercial arteries to a standstill. The severity of this aviation crisis is a direct measure of the political cynicism driving the shutdown. The functioning of the entire global transport network relies on the predictable, funded operation of these American public services. Trump's continued stance insisting that Congress open the country without first resolving the underlying demands for healthcare subsidies is deliberately using the nation's operational capacity as leverage. The aviation chaos, which costs the economy billions and creates massive public hardship, is viewed as an acceptable collateral loss in the leader's pursuit of a legislative victory. This infrastructure paralysis is a shocking public display of a deeper failure, the inability of the government to sustain its most critical functions when the political will is absent. The safety of the American skies, the efficiency of commercial travel,
and the stability of the public sector are all being sacrificed for a political gamble. The air traffic controllers and TSA agents are not striking for higher wages. They are demanding the basic right to be paid for their essential life-saving work. Their collective hardship, reflected in the chaos on the tarmac, is the physical evidence that the moral abdication in Washington has a direct, crippling effect on the daily lives of every American citizen.
We have analyzed the devastation wrought by the shutdown, the hunger and the chaos in the skies. But the final critical front in this political battle is the war of narratives. The desperate zero-sum struggle between Republicans and Democrats to avoid accountability for the crisis in the eyes of the American public. This fight for blame is crucial because it will determine the long-term political consequences of the shutdown. The rhetoric from the White House is consistent and unforgiving. Trump continually insists that the Democrats are the singular obstacle, the party that has closed the country and is deliberately obstructing the resumption of essential services. His public stance is a defensive maneuver. By framing the issue as an emotional plea to open the country, he attempts to deflect attention from the core reason for the impasse: his own insistence on using the budget and humanitarian aid as leverage for his unrelated legislative goals. Trump's narrative attempts to paint himself as the rational party, ready to govern, while casting the Democrats as the radical fringe demanding political concessions while the nation suffers. However, public opinion is proving resistant to this maneuver. The majority of Americans, while frustrated with Congress as a whole, are assigning the primary blame for the crisis to Trump and the Republican Party. The political logic is simple and brutal. The Republicans control all levers of federal power: the White House, the House of Representatives, and the Senate. When the government fails to function, the party in control is held responsible. This perception is exacerbated by the highly visible moral catastrophe of cutting SNAP benefits, a decision that is politically toxic and impossible to defend against charges of unprecedented political cynicism. Trump's historic refusal to fund the food program, a measure he himself authorized during his previous shutdown, is seen not as a negotiating tactic, but as an act of calculated cruelty. The long-term political prognosis for both parties hinges on the speed of resolution. The Democrats, despite being caught in Trump's trap, hold a key advantage. They are positioned as the party fighting to restore humanitarian funding and provide healthcare subsidies. Their ability to consistently stress the moral high ground, the shocking nature of children facing hunger due to a political squabble, is a powerful counter-narrative. If the Democrats can hold firm and force Trump to concede the funding or pass a clean budget bill quickly, they will emerge from the crisis in a dominant political position. Conversely, Trump's gamble is high risk. If the hardship continues, the public's anger will solidify against his administration. However, if the Democrats fail to resolve the crisis swiftly, the blame could eventually begin to fall on both parties equally, confirming a sense of political gridlock and incompetence across the board. The longer the government remains closed, the higher the human and economic cost, and the more irreparable the damage to the reputation of the party in power. The outcome of this war of narratives will determine not just the fate of the food stamp program, but the political balance leading into the next election cycle. We have analyzed the political cynicism, the deliberate tactical maneuvering, and the immediate human and infrastructural costs of the ongoing government shutdown. The unavoidable conclusion is stark. This crisis risks becoming the most destructive shutdown in U.S. history, not merely for the duration it lasts, but for the profound, targeted damage it is inflicting upon the nation's core social contract and its most vulnerable citizens. The reason for this severity is that the shutdown has transcended a fiscal dispute and become a moral catastrophe. Trump's calculated use of the SNAP, the food stamp program, as a negotiation hostage marks an unprecedented low point in political warfare. By deliberately withholding funds from a program that directly assures the provisional food security of 42 million Americans, the leader has weaponized hunger.
This tactic is causing immediate, measurable suffering, forcing state and local governments to declare emergencies and mobilize charities to fill a gap that is structurally impossible for them to cover. The tragedy is that the pain is being inflicted not out of budgetary necessity as the funds exist, but out of a cynical political desire to force legislative surrender. The consequences of this prolonged, deliberate chaos are irreversible. The paralysis in the skies, caused by essential personnel being forced to work without pay, is not just an economic inconvenience. It exposes the fragility of the entire national infrastructure. The image of mass flight delays and cancellations across major hubs is a public indictment of a governance model that prioritizes political maneuvering over public safety. The political system is proving that it is structurally incapable of managing basic functions when faced with an ideological dispute. The solution to this crisis is equally clear and lies entirely within the political will of the parties involved. The single path to restoring governance and ending the crisis is to put an immediate stop to the political cynicism that created it. This means abandoning the tactic of using humanitarian aid and public safety as bargaining chips. The expert consensus calls for Congress to pass a clean, unencumbered bill that simply restores government funding and allows essential services to resume operations. Only then, with the basic functions of the government restored, can meaningful, good faith negotiations on long-term policy issues such as healthcare subsidies begin. By continuing this destructive farce, Trump is not demonstrating strength. He is confirming to the American public that his politics are defined by a willingness to inflict maximum suffering on the most vulnerable to achieve his own ends. The longer the shutdown continues, the more politically isolated the party in power will become, and the more profound the damage to the nation's trust in its own government institutions.